to change and to go through the story of Joseph, because there are just so many wonderful lessons that we can learn from that. Two lessons mainly that we will learn from the story of Joseph. And the story of Joseph is basically in Genesis 37 and through 41, and then just a little bit in the 50th chapter. But 37 and 39 and 40 are when you hear the story of Joseph. And there are some lessons that we need to get from this. The first one is God's power over Satan and the world. Just as in Job, Satan, through people, did everything he could to keep Joseph from being what he was prophesied to be and to thwart God's plan. But every time God used those things that he did to cause problems, he used those as stepping stones to get the plan done. He used all those problems, all those things that we would think as negatives. God used every one of them as a stepping stone to make his plan come true. Without those things, it wouldn't have been the same. So we can learn from this story how powerful God is, and that when we see a defeat, we need to see it as what God is doing to see his plan come through in his way, not our way. And the second is all the things that Satan did to keep Joseph from being who he was supposed to be. Every one of them turned Joseph into the man that he was supposed to be, so that he could do what God had prophesied him to do. And when we truly understand how powerful God is and how he uses even the worst things in life to our good, it will make us happier, more contented, and better Christians when we understand that God is truly in control. We'll start with a little bit of verses from the 37th chapter of Genesis, and we'll start with a little bit of with verse 2. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. First thing we learn about Joseph is he's a snitch. Okay? Now, I'm sure that they deserved it. But we all know that if you want to deal with people, you have to deal with people. The first time people mess up, you don't go running. You go say, hey, you know what? You need to do better. You need to do that. You need to talk to people. But as we read this, and almost everybody I've known, when we talk about the story of Joseph and you read all the things, you think, Joseph really wasn't a very pleasant young man. And that just comes across to everybody that reads it. He's a dreamer, which means he's lazy. Later on, he goes out. His father says, go help your brothers. He's 17. He should be out there already. But he's back. He's lazy. And when he has these dreams, does he say, well, now, Pop, I know that the dream says you're going to bow down before me, but I'm sure it must be something else. It must be, did he try to make it better? No. And I'm sure if Joseph had done these things, the Holy Spirit would have had it written so that when you read it, you didn't think he was a spoiled little lazy brat. But when you read it, that's what you get. Now, verse 3 says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. We all know of people who are spoiled. We know people who are spoiled. But you know what? Most of them, their brothers and sisters don't hate them. They're not too pleased with their parents, but they don't hate them. But evidently, Joseph didn't do very much to help his brothers to like him. Joseph is going to end up being a man who not only saves his family from starvation, all 70 of them, but he saves thousands of Egyptians from starving because of what he tells Pharaoh from God's dream. And he, through administering the things that God told him, that Pharaoh put him in charge of, he made Egypt the richest and most powerful nation of its time. When that dream about the cows came, and he told Pharaoh what it meant, that it meant there were going to be 7 great years and 7 bad years, and he needed to take 1/5 of the crop and store it up. That made Egypt, on those 7 lean years, the most important nation on the face of the earth. It wasn't just Joseph's family that came to Egypt. Other people did. And I think we all know that when you're hungry, gold, silver, and money don't mean a thing. Egypt became filthy rich because of what God was doing through Joseph. They became filthy rich because for 7 years, they were the breadbasket of the ancient world. And he was put in charge by Pharaoh of running the program. Now, I can guarantee you, the spoiled, dreamer, lazy young man that couldn't get along with anybody would not have been a man who could have been the second in command of all of Egypt. That 17-year-old boy could not have done what Joseph did. God gave him a dream and told him that even his parents would bow down to him tell him how. And I'm sure he had no idea of all the things that he was going to go through. Now, there's dreams you find in 37:5 through 11. But I'm not going to read all those dreams, but I want us to understand. I want you to have to read the story yourself. But he has this wonderful, wonderful future ahead of him. But in 37, the 18th, 37 verse 18, his brothers see him coming from afar. And before he came near to them, they conspired against to kill him. And they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer." Well, they decided not to kill him. They decided, why should we kill him and have his blood on our hands when we can sell him? Because they're just out of the blue. There came a trader. A slave trader came by. You think God didn't have that plan? They sold him into slavery. Now, they had him in a pit. Now, I'm pretty sure that Joseph started rethinking his life goals when he was sitting in that pit. You know, I think he started thinking, you know, maybe I should have been nicer to my brothers. Maybe I should have been nicer. Because when we hear of him in Egypt, he's a changed person. He's already started the transformation. Now, in verse 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. The advantage that Joseph had over Job was God let Job go through all of his trials, and then at the end came in and said, looky. But with Joseph, the Lord was with him. And if Potiphar knew the Lord was with him, certainly Joseph did. Joseph had already started that maturing process from being that 17-year-old know-it-all kid to somebody that was trustworthy, that was able to be something. He saw that God was with him. He understood that. And that is the key to turning life's stumbling blocks into stepping stones, is to understanding that God is with you, and that whatever happens, he's going to make it work out. To have that understanding. He knew that the Lord was with him, and that things were going, everything worked good. Everything worked great. And then Potiphar's wife decided she wanted a nice young Hebrew man. So she set him up and got thrown in prison. You know, when you get knocked down once, pretty easy to get back up. When you get knocked down twice, that hurts. And Joseph's master, this is verse 20, took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. He's just been kicked in the teeth the second time, but the Lord was with him. And the Lord caused the keeper of the prison to find favor with Joseph. That 17-year-old boy would never have done that. But this Joseph, who had been through the trials, who had been through all these things, was a different person. He was a person that people trusted. I mean, after all, when he told his parents of the dream when they would be bowing down to him, his dad remembered it, but he didn't trust him. He didn't say, oh, well then maybe he wasn't trustworthy. But this man has now become trustworthy. He's learned to manage a house. Now, he's learned how to manage a prison. And having worked in a prison, that ain't easy. Because they don't want to be good. They're not in there because they're good. They're in there because they like being bad. But the Lord was with him, and he succeeded. And instead of these times when he gets kicked in the teeth and drugged down, bringing him down, he learns he can succeed. He learns that he can do things with the Lord's blessing. He can do things, and that nothing can keep him down. Now, Joseph's there in prison, and two inmates have dreams. And he tells them what those dreams are. He tells one, you're going to go back to Pharaoh's favor. He tells the baker, you're going to be hanged. Well, he tells the cupbearer, remember me. Remember me. And the cupbearer immediately forgot him. I mean, isn't that the way of people? You do them a great big favor, and next thing you know, it's forgotten. They don't remember what you did. They'll never say thank you. They'll never do that. Evidently that didn't get Joseph down, though. He just kept in there. I think because by now he had learned that God was doing things in his own way, in his own time, much different than he thought. And just think what would have happened if he had said, if the cupbearer had remembered and said, hey, you know, Pharaoh, this guy in prison there, he told me my dream and it came true. And Pharaoh would have said, well, so what? I got 100 people that interpret dreams. That's just another guy in prison telling me he's a nobody. He's a nothing. It was God's plan that the cupbearer forgot. It was God's plan that wasn't until Pharaoh had a dream and it couldn't be interpreted that the cupbearer goes, oh, I remember Joseph, this man, give him a shot. I'm pretty sure that Joseph was not pleased being in prison all that time, from the time he told the cupbearer and the cupbearer got out. I'm pretty sure he wasn't pleased about still being in prison. Because even though, you know what? If you're the top dog in the prison, you're still in prison. You still don't like it. But he had learned through all the trials to have faith in God and to stay the course. How many people do you know that when you do the right thing and it doesn't turn out right and people don't treat you right, how many people have you seen do a 180 and start becoming mean and nasty and doing all? I've seen that a lot of times when people don't get what they deserve. It turns them sour. But not Joseph. He just hung in there, and when the time was right, God had him prepared. So, in that dream, he tells Pharaoh what the dream means. And he says, now Pharaoh, you need to find a good person. You need to put him in charge of this. And you need to put them in charge of these people and doing that. And you know what? That doesn't sound like the 17-year-old Joseph. The 17-year-old Joseph was all about me. Send me in, coach. I'm the one. He didn't say that. He said, you need to find somebody. You need to find somebody. You need to put them in. But Pharaoh saw in the character of Joseph, not only could he interpret the dreams, but he saw in the character of this man that didn't say, well, and you know, the Lord said you need to put me in charge. Because now, think, be honest with yourself. If you've been Joseph, don't you think you'd have been pretty tempted to say, you know what? Give me this. Do this for me. Do that. But Joseph's character had been forged by the trials that God had allowed him to have, but had carried him through and protected him through. It had forged his character into a man that the Pharaoh of Egypt made second in command over all of Egypt. A slave was above the generals of Egypt. A slave was above the counselors of Egypt. A slave was above the nobles of Egypt. Because God had placed him in a time and a place and had prepared him for that position. Everything that he went through, everything that happened, worked together because God planned it that way. That he was there at the right time. And so when his family came, he was able to take those 70 people. Because the way I read it, it says there were 70 and Joseph was already in Egypt. So that makes 71. But there were 70. And Joseph and his wife. Now, 430 years later, they leave Egypt. During that time, they went from 70 people to a mighty nation. A nation that the new Pharaoh said, I'm afraid they might join the enemy. We need to make these all slaves and we need to put them down because they could be dangerous. 430 years of being, most of that time being favored in Egypt, protected. They were able to grow into a mighty nation, able to take the land that God had promised Abraham so long ago. All of these things were possible because of the trials that Joseph went through. He was able to do that because he had learned some things. In all those things, he had learned that God was in charge. That God not only was in charge, but God took everything and made it to his benefit. So when his brothers got scared and talked to him, over in chapter 50, verses 19 and 21, they were afraid and they went to talk to him. But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? This is the second in command of all Egypt." If he thought somebody deserved to go to prison, they'd go to prison. If he thought somebody deserved to die, they would die. But he didn't see himself as that. He said, "Am I in the place of God? As for you," Joseph never got all emotional and weird. He was able to see the truth, but see God. He said, "But as for you, you meant evil against me. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." The things that he went through caused him to trust God completely, implicitly, and understand that God could turn anything into a blessing. The challenge for you is you are going to have stumbling blocks thrown in front of you. I can guarantee it. Bad things are going to happen to you. The choice is, are you going to be like Joseph and see God's hand as a blessing. To see that even though you don't understand why it's happening or what good can happen from it, that it will. To have that kind of trust and obedience in God, it's your choice whether bad things become a stumbling block or a stepping stone. It's your choice to become what God wants you to be. And you can only do that by trusting Him in both the good and the bad. If anybody needs to answer the invitation in public way, we'd ask that you come now as we stand and sing.